Hello everybody. If you are watching this, you may have seen my previous video, which is so far my most popular video on YouTube, and that was how to use your Pod HD 500X as in-ear monitors for your headphone amp and mixer for in-ear monitors as you're using it for guitar. So this is kind of a follow-up video to that with the Line 6 Pod Go. And I've been using this type of setup for a while now and refined it just a little bit. And the Pod Go has some nice features that actually clean up the options, even compared to the Pod HD 500. So I'm just going to walk you through how I have this set up, because this setup that you see here with the Pod and a DI box, and I've got an amp here as well, is everything I use for electric guitar and could be used for a bass rig as well. So this is what I've got set up so far. The guitar going in, and the effects loop return has my monitor mix coming back in. The effects send is sending my guitar signal to the house, into the DI box. And the amp out is sending the amp without the cab modeling to the return of my amp on stage. And then the headphone out is sending my guitar plus monitor mix back up to my in-ears, which I've just got taped as an extension to my guitar cable. So everything is going through the Pod, and I have a direct control over my in-ear mix with the volume here, and that doesn't affect what's sent to the house because that's my effects loop is going to the house, so I can adjust my headphone volume here without changing what goes to the mixer. And it doesn't change what goes to my amp, so if I adjust my headphone volume up, it doesn't change the amount of guitar going to my amp for on-stage monitoring. And I can also decide whether or not I hear my guitar directly through the Pod before it even goes to the house, or I can have it set up so that it comes back just through my monitor mix, so it has to go through the house and come back before I hear the guitar. So it can be set up either way. So that is the quick rundown of it, and I'll zoom in on the screen here and show you how I have that set up in the software, and show you exactly where the signal goes in what order. So here I have my preset, and if I click on the view button, it'll show you the path, the signal path, and have the input. So guitar is in normal, and there's a gate on there, and then it has the usual volume, wah. Those you can't change on the Pod Go. They're always volume and wah. So then I've got compressor and distortion, the guitar head, delay, reverb, a little EQ, and then the cab. And the important part here is this, that the effects loop is after the cabinet. So what's happening there is the full processed guitar sound, so the head and the cab, everything to do with the full complete guitar sound. At the very end I have this effects loop, and that is sending that effects loop sound into the DI. And if you were close to your mixer, or you had an on-stage mixer that's not that far away, you could even just take a 1/4-inch cable and go directly into the mixer. You wouldn't even need a DI. But if your board is farther away from the stage, like in most setups, then that's the best way to do it, is go into a DI box. And that is always going to be at the same volume regardless of whether you adjust the master output. It can be adjusted by the effects loop send. So this send over here will adjust the amount sent to the DI. If it's clipping the input, you can always cut that and boost it as well if you're not getting enough signal. And the other important one here is the mix. So this mix, if it's set all the way to 100, then the effects return that has my monitor mix coming in is the only thing that I'm going to hear. My effects loop is set at 100% of my mix. On the other hand, if I want to hear some of my guitar signal coming through before it even goes to the DI, I can bring this back and blend in how much of my guitar signal passes through to my in-ears before even going to the monitor mix. And this is really handy if you want to be able to hear yourself practicing a part while you're muted in the house and the rest of the band is doing something else and you don't want to be bothering them. You can just bring this down all the way to 0%, will be a straight pass through. At 0%, my full guitar signal is going to go right through to my in-ears. But that doesn't change the amount that goes to the house, because that's on the effects send. So I typically have it somewhere around that 60 to 70%, and that gives me a good flexibility between just blending a little bit left if I want to hear more of my guitar versus the house, and further to the right if I want to hear more of my monitor mix. Sorry, not house, monitor mix. So that is the effects loop. And you have to make sure that the effects loop is on for this to work. So make sure it's not disabled like that. So the other part is the amp out. That's new on the Pod Go compared to the HD 500 series. And that's really handy because now I can also send something to my onstage amp that has a proper sound of that, something that should go to an amp. Because if you have the same thing that's going to your house, that's the cabinet emulation on, if that goes into your amp, you're kind of getting two cabinets and two mic setups, and it just starts to sound really shrill and not proper. So the place you want to go for that is under Global Settings, and it is the amp out source. So here you have the options of main out, and that will send the same thing as your headphones back out to the amp, and you don't want that. What you want is pre-cab, pre-IR. This will take everything that's directly left of your cabinet model, and it'll send that to your amp. So that is what you want, amp out source as pre-cab / IR. That means it will take the signal right after this EQ, but before the cabinet. That's the signal that the amp out will send to your onstage amp. And I have it going into the effects return on the back of the amp, so I'm not using any of the preamp controls on the front of the amp. It's strictly using this as a powered guitar cabinet. So that gives me a nice, proper, non-mic'd sound from the amp on stage, so a nice direct sound up here. And it gives me a full amp model, mic'd cabinet model going into the DI to the house without the need for even micing my cabinet because the pod is doing that job. And for that sake, you don't have to have an amp on stage. You could bypass that if you want to go strictly in-ears and you don't want to have an amp on stage. That's fine. This will do everything you need it to without even having that amp on the stage. The pod, the DI box, and that's it. Nice and simple. The Pod Go is by far the most affordable device with the whole Helix engine in it. It sounds awesome. And if you're not using dual amps or multi-signal paths, then you really don't need much more than this. It's a great solution to just plug in, and it's very portable and does everything. It sounds great. So I think that's everything there is to explain about it. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the comments, and I will try my best to answer the questions you may have. So thanks for watching.